And I know it's a little bit warm in here, but we promise to make sure that this ends on time. So please bear with us. I'd like to thank the United Way as well. Anyway, I'm going to introduce a young lady that's a good friend of mine for a long time. She's going to introduce our moderator. So please give a warm welcome to Regina Clement. Regina.
Good evening. My name is Regina Clement, and I am a member of the Providence Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, one of the coalition partners for tonight's gubernatorial debate. It is my pleasure to introduce you to my friend, Kyle Bennett. Kyle Bennett is currently the Director of the Policy and Equity for the United Way of Rhode Island. In his role, Kyle manages a team of people with a focus on defining challenges for our community and moving policy that addresses our unmet needs. It's Kyle's goal to create systems that serve the greater good while helping people with immediate needs that have been historically left behind. His primary focus is to ensure that all Rhode Islanders have a safe, affordable, healthy place to live. So again, it is my honor to introduce you to my friend, Kyle Bennett.
Good evening everybody. How you like this weather? They thought we were kidding when we said you're gonna be on the hot seat tonight. We didn't know you were all gonna be on the hot seat. So, as Regina said, I'd like to thank you for that wonderful introduction, Regina. I am Kyle Bennett, Director of Policy and Equity for United Way of Rhode Island. Our mission is uniting the community and building racial equity and opportunities for all Rhode Islanders. Uniting the community and building racial equity. So tonight, we have a series of questions that were posed by each of the organizations that you see here tonight, and we're going to ask each candidate the same questions. They'll all get a chance to answer. By the time we get through, you're going to have a better sense of who they are, what they represent, and hopefully lead you to make your plan so you can vote on time. Early in-person voting began today. Thank you, Secretary. Appreciate that for making that permanent, as well as the members of our legislature. At United Way, we aim to be more equitable and accessible for Rhode Island, particularly for members of BIPOC communities, Black, Indigenous, and people of color. Because as we look through our last strategic planning process, we realize that the outcomes for people of color, people from BIPOC communities, are significantly lower whenever you expect them to be good or positive for people of BIPOC, from BIPOC communities. And they're significantly higher for our white counterparts. So we said, we've been funding solutions based on income level, and that hasn't actually solved the problem. So we said, we're going to take a look at income and also take a look at race, place, gender, and every other demographic that allows us to look and think differently about the way we invest, the policies we advocate for, and the way we engage our folks. So tonight, the NAACP Voter Engagement Coalition has provided us with this opportunity to engage our candidates. So you're going to hear from them in just a second. But we, again, will talk a little bit about the state of Rhode Island today and into the future. So tonight's event, as you have seen or heard, is predominantly hosted by predominantly Black-led organizations, including the NAACP Providence branch. We could give them a round of applause. Providence Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta. Give them a round of applause. Rhode Island Coalition of 100 Black Women. The Kappa Phi Zeta Chapter of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated. And Mentor Rhode Island. The sponsors for tonight's event are John Hope Settlement House and United Way of Rhode Island. And I personally have to give a big shout out to my president and CEO, Courtney Nicolato. She could not be here tonight. Our team has to divide and conquer, but I'd also like to acknowledge my immediate supervisor, Dr. Larry Warner, Director of Impact and Equity for United Way, and the entire Team United. Many of our members are here tonight, but even more looking and watching and supporting each of our candidates and all of you on the NAACP's Facebook Live page. So, last but not least, I'm going to shout out John Hope. because I too am a John Hope kid, an after school and summer kid. When I look back and I see Dr. Cleopas Clark on the wall, and I think about the lessons that we learned in this gymnasium, the stories that were told, and the way that we engaged, I know the importance of after school and summer learning. These are things that are critical to our environment. These are things that will help to mitigate the learning opportunity gap that exists. So I want to thank Executive Director. I see him, he's plugging things in and sweeping up, but certainly Mr. Branford Davis, as well as the entire John Hope staff of dedicated professionals for all of our kids and youth. This event's being streamed, as I mentioned, on the NAACP branch's NAACP Providence branch's Facebook page. And without further ado, we will get to the heart of tonight's activities and introduce our candidates for governor for the great state of Rhode Island. As you may notice, there's an empty seat at the end of the table, but for those of you who are aware, Governor McKee has COVID, and while we hope he recovers quickly, he did send an opening statement, and that will conclude his interaction with us for tonight. So if we can.
Person, but I'm happy to share this message with the people of Rhode Island. As governor, I have made equity a top priority in my administration, along with health, education, and the economy. When I took office, we immediately got to work to get people vaccinated in the minority community. We partnered in with the COVID-19 Equity Council to make site-specific vaccination days in communities of color. And with everyone's help, Rhode Island is now #1 in the country in vaccinations. I know that equity is important in leadership. That's why I made sure leaders in my administration and our state agencies are reflective of the communities we've served. From our Lieutenant Governor to one of my top chiefs of staff, to our Director of Community Outreach, to our judges, Colonel of the State Police, Commissioner of Education, and to our Commerce Department, which has helped us recover our economy faster than anywhere in the Northeast and reach the lowest unemployment rate in the history of the state of Rhode Island, and there's still good paying jobs available. Our Office for Diversity, Equity, and Opportunity, headed by Tomas Avila, who I appointed, is having great success. The Minority Business Report is over 16%. 16% of those contracts are going to minority-owned businesses. That's the first time that's ever happened. Before I was governor, I was a coach, boys and girls, diverse teams, hundreds of games over several years. It taught me a great deal about what was lacking in many of the kids' lives, which had to do with education. So in 2009, I started public schools called Nero Academies. Thousands of students attend those schools now. Those public schools today are 3 of the top 15 elementary schools in the state, 3 of the top 10 middle schools in the state, and the only schools on that list that have more than 30% free and reduced lunch population. I am uniquely qualified to help good things happen in Providence schools by working with people and making sure that those kids get the very best opportunity possible. My record over the last 18 months speaks for itself. We have much work ahead of us, and we know it takes leadership to bring all of the impacted communities to the table and make sure that their voices are part of the process.
All right, as we wait for the lights to come back on, those were the remarks from Governor McKee. I just want to go over the ground rules for the remaining activities. We'll begin, as we are now, with opening remarks. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to introduce themselves and their candidacy to you. We'll then ask the candidates a series of 8 or 9 questions, depending on time. To those questions, each candidate will have an additional 2 minutes to respond. All responses are to be directed to the audience, as they are the individuals that must be convinced to vote. We address Governor McKee. When all questions have been asked and answered, we will conclude the program. We ask that all members of the audience allow the candidates to give their response in full without interruption for our participants at home to fully hear each response and be able to make their decision on who to vote for accordingly. With that in mind, we will begin. Let's begin with Luis on the left. First question. Housing Works Rhode Island reported in its 2021 Housing Fact Book that white households experience among the lowest rates of cost burden and severe cost burden, where individuals or households spend more than 30% of their income on housing-related expenses. Black and Latino households experience the highest rates of both. Particularly concerning is the 40% of Black and Latino households experiencing cost burdens, with 20% of Black homeowners who are severely cost burdened. 1 in 5 Black homeowners is paying more than 50% of their income on housing costs. One household emergency puts them at risk of delinquency or foreclosure. The question: how do you propose addressing these disparities in housing cost burden, and who would you partner with to do so?
Sorry, so are we doing opening statements too, or just jumping to the question? And it's 2 minutes for the question?
2 minutes.
All right. Thank you. Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Luis Daniel Munoz. Grew up in Central Falls, experienced homelessness, and certainly saw the struggle that my mother had raising 5 children and the difficulty she faced in paying rent. When we look at cities like Central Falls, Woonsocket, Pawtucket, Providence, you'd have to be making somewhere between $69,000 to $75,000 a year to pay for a mortgage. These are the same cities where we have about 45 to 50% of single-family households. When we talk about housing, we need to think not just about building housing, and I'll talk about that in a moment, but we need to think about getting towards a livable wage. We have $1.1 billion that the federal government's giving us. We should be aggressive in creating supplemental wage programs that can help minimum wage earners today get closer towards that $25 mark. Right now in Rhode Island, there is only an effort to go to 15, and someone on stage will say 19. That's not enough. When we talk about low income and affordable housing, what's been missing in this campaign is low income housing. A lot of people will talk about affordable housing, but we need to put not just more than $250 million of the ARPA dollars towards housing. We need to use the low-income housing federal tax credits that exist creatively. Rhode Island has missed $1.5 billion federal dollars that we could have acquired over the last several years because we are not adequately using the available funds of the federal government, or at least applying for the federal funds that the government is willing to give us. None of this really matters if we're not tackling culture of classism here in Rhode Island, if we're not tackling zoning issues across cities and towns, and if we are not really focusing on language, low-income housing. People earning more, people being able to pay for rent, stabilization around rent, people being able to afford a mortgage, all of these things matter, but none of it's going to change unless you have the courage to push on institutions and on politicians that have not been willing to push forward in this area. My lived experience, the lens of equity that I use both on the Equity Council and beyond is going to help me do that as governor. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I have to apologize. I totally omitted the opening statements for each of you. So we're going to continue with this question, and then we'll come back and begin with opening statements in the next round.
All right, great. So we did not get here overnight. The housing crisis, often in a crisis, we call it a crisis, but it's something that happens over a decade or a generation. And so we have built very little housing stock, and so that is how we have gotten to where we are right now. In terms of disparate impacts in housing, it has to do with the economy that we have built, which is one that is not broad-based, one where there is not equal opportunity, and especially not equal economic opportunity. So as governor, you will have someone that works to create a better business environment, a more inclusive business environment, one that reduces taxes and reduces regulations so it is easier to participate in the economy. The other thing is to deal with the housing crisis. We have $250 million allocated towards housing. We need to ensure that the money is spent well, that the money is not wasted and given out to insiders and cronies and people who will not actually produce the results for the people. So with me as governor, we will make sure that there is a pool of money for developers to use, and we will increase the housing stock across the state. One of the first things that I will do is put together a council of cities and towns to ensure, to ask why they haven't hit their 10% mark. We need to work with cities and towns to actually produce results, because a lot of times they are the drivers of why we haven't had development in housing. So with me as governor, you will have somebody who will collaboratively work with my partners in order to solve the housing crisis and ensure that the money that has been allocated will not be wasted, and it will not be given out in a way that is not for the people of Rhode Island.
So, love that we're starting with the housing question. I hope to be your housing governor. Many of you in this audience have seen me work on this already. I was an executive director of Housing Works Rhode Island, a broad coalition of businesses, nonprofits, and we were able to convince Rhode Islanders for the first time to invest in housing bonds for the state of Rhode Island. And that resulted in the building of at least 2,000 units of housing just during the time that I was at Housing Works. It has now been continued as a policy of the state. That's change, when you start changing the structures of government to be more responsive to the people's needs. I'm running for governor because I understand how instrumental it is for every single Rhode Islander to have a home that's affordable. Housing is foundational to your education, because a child whose parents can't afford the rent and has to move twice in a school year is going to have a very hard time to be able to recover, because housing is a social determinant of health. Housing is even a determinant of climate change, because how we heat and cool our homes and how expensive or not it is key. So when we talk about equity in housing, we need to talk about making sure that we are building homes at every single part, from people that happen to be unhoused, to family housing, to ones for our seniors to retire into. I know how to do that work. I have been in government and in the community. I've actually even been slightly for a short time period in the private sector. I know how to connect these things to bring about different results. And so I'm looking forward to doing this. And the other piece of this is that there is a Black and Latino contractors and home builders, businesses out there ready to start building that housing. And so this is about not just providing the housing to people, but also giving them entrepreneurial opportunities to be able to move our communities forward.
Hi everyone, I'm Helena Folks, and I'm so glad we're here tonight. I think we're going to find on many of these issues we have more in common in terms of how we think about the problem, and housing is absolutely foundational to everyone's lives in this state. And we do know that Rhode Island has one of the worst levels of home ownership for Black and brown people in the country. Also, for every $1 that white families make in this state, Black and brown families make only 57 cents. So we have massive discrepancies. I think the big difference between me and everyone else on this stage is I have led a massive organization. I led 200,000 people at CVS, and I know how to get big things done. And I have a plan on my website on housing that I think would make a big impact. It always has, for me, short, medium, and long-term ideas. And just to pick a few, in the short term, we were way too slow on the eviction dollars that we got from the federal government 18 months ago. Way too slow. We were not serving people of need. In the medium term, we could have accessory dwelling units. We could change our zoning so that we could more quickly build units. We need 20,000 units, and we've got to get moving on it. In the long term, I agree with Dr. Munoz. We are one of only 2 states in New England that does not have a match on the federal low-income housing tax bonds. We've left $1.4 billion on the table in the last decade. So my plan is to get big things done by putting the right people on this and really making change for the people of Rhode Island.
Thank you. Thanks for having us here tonight. Rents have gone up 24% in just the last 2 years in the Providence area. People can't afford that. And the costs of owning a home have skyrocketed also. And the cost burden is borne disproportionately by Black and brown people in Rhode Island. What do we do about it? Our plan is to build tens of thousands of truly affordable homes. Under our plan, no one will pay more than 20% of their income for these homes. We also have to cap rent increases. So we will cap annual rent increases at 4% a year. Rents will not be able to go up more than 4% a year. We know what we need to do, and we can do it. This is the richest country in the history of the world. So why is it that so many people in our state are struggling to afford housing, to buy a home or rent a home? It's a policy choice. It's a policy decision. This year alone, Governor McKee gave tens of millions of dollars of public money to a corporate developer to build luxury apartments in the Superman building instead of building affordable housing. A few weeks ago, Governor McKee cast the deciding vote to give $60 million of our money that was supposed to go in part to affordable housing, and he gave it all to a corporate developer to build a soccer stadium in Pawtucket when people can't afford to keep a roof over their heads. It is a policy choice of the people in power that some of our people struggle to afford to keep a roof over their heads and over their children's heads. And it is a policy of the people in power that some of our people slip through the cracks and live outside. And when I'm governor, it won't happen anymore. Thank you.
All right. So, as I mentioned, we're going to begin now with the round of opening remarks. I'm a housing first advocate, but even I've taken it to a new level today, so I apologize again to all the candidates. This time I'd like to start with Matt.
Thank you very much. Every problem that we see in this state is disproportionately affecting Black and brown communities. So we need to address racial disparities systematically and across the board. We need to shut down the polluting industries in the Port of Providence that are poisoning the air and water in that largely Black and brown neighborhood. We need to pass the Equality in Abortion Coverage Act that will get rid of the ban on abortion access for Medicaid recipients who are disproportionately communities of color. We need to address the affordable housing crisis, as we just talked about, that is disproportionately borne by communities of color. We need to fundamentally change the criminal justice system that has caused so much harm to Black and brown people. And I want to thank the people in the back who are calling for counselors, not cops. We don't need police in our schools. We need teachers who are paid. We need social workers. We need mental health care professionals, not police in our schools. We need to tax the rich and fund our schools and pay our teachers and provide the services that our people need. We need Medicare for all, not a healthcare system designed for profit that has driven massive health disparities on racial grounds. We need to do all these things, and we can. But no one can do it alone, not even a governor. And that's why I'm running with the great state Senator Cynthia Mendes for Lieutenant Governor, and we're running together with dozens of extraordinary Rhode Islanders, teachers, social workers, nurses, people who've been doing the work of caring for our communities for a long, long time. This is not a campaign just to elect a new governor, it's a campaign to elect a whole new government. And when we do, together, we can make real change and real progress. Thank you.
Oh, thank you again. Thank you, all of you who put this on this evening. I'm really thrilled to be here. And absolutely, every problem we have in this state is fundamentally impacting our Black and brown communities in a way that is just devastating. And I want to talk about the one thing that I am wholly committed to doing, and I think I set myself apart on this stage for, and that is education, education, education. I think it is where everything starts. We are doing a massive disservice to our children. If you look at our state as a whole, only 33% of our kids pass their grade level reading tests and only 20% in math. Let me share the numbers in Providence. 14% of our kids pass reading, 7% in math, and it's even worse in Central Falls. This is shameful. Those two cities are two of the worst cities in the country, and we have had a generation of politicians who've paid lip service to this issue. I'm the only person on this stage who has a complete plan. Please go and look at it at my website. I propose spending $1 billion on public school education. Just last week, we learned that the cities and towns of Rhode Island received $400 million directly from the federal government for education. This was 18 months ago, and now only 10%, less than 10% of that money has been spent. Our kids are going back to school next week, and we miss summer learning, and this is hurting Black and brown children much more significantly. You shouldn't have to be rich or lucky to send your kid to a great school. Every child in this state should have access to great schools, and I will hold myself accountable to results. I won't run again if our scores don't improve.
Right. Well, thank you everyone again for being here tonight. You know, I'm running for governor because I am committed to making our economy more equitable and just. That's not just me saying it. Many of you in this room have seen me work at this for the last 30 years. And we've had some successes along that path. And now I'm running to be your next governor so that we can do even more. Because it is time for us to be at the decision-making part of the table. I know how to bring people together across a variety of communities. And I know that in order to build that community that's more equitable and just, we need to invest in what's here and now, in our local businesses, especially in our Black and brown communities. I know, because I know personally, small businesses here in our state that have not been given a fair chance, that have not seen the kind of support that others, bigger corporations have received. I am here to make this economy more equitable and just, but we have to start with some fundamentals. And like I said, I want to be the housing governor because housing is critical to being able to do anything else, to getting that really good job, to being able to get that really good education. Like I said before, and we talked a little bit about housing. Housing is absolutely connected to education, and education in this state has to be improved. I will help pass a constitutional amendment that gives it a legal right to every child in this state to have a quality education. And I'm going to work with all of you on that. Because I've done it before, you know that I will. I'm also going to work on climate change, which disproportionately affects communities of color as well, in terms of the impact on our environment. And it's not just about creating a renewable economy, energy economy. It's about making sure that the jobs and the business creation that happens in that new business is happening across communities, including communities of color, especially communities of color. Thanks.
Thank you so much for having me here today. I'm always sort of quiet and humbled when I come into a setting like this, because in any other country or any other time, someone like myself would not be here. I came from nothing. My mother was a single mother who started her own business, and the first thing that she did when she had any sort of money was to move us to a city that had an excellent public school, because she knew that education was the great equalizer. And at school choice, when I was a high school student not doing very well, saved my future. And I am a business owner who has built a business by myself. And when you build a business, help a business grow, and help others achieve their own success, you are a different sort of leader. I also have had a majority-minority organization in the state of Rhode Island because my organizations lived up to my values. And I will say that every year I hear the Democrat Party profess to care about social justice and equity and all of the buzzwords. But we're trapping children in failing schools, we are failing to correct inequities, and at some point there needs to be consequences. Elections are about consequences, and they're about demanding results. And the problems that we have did not come overnight, but they have been caused by one-party rule in the state. And I would ask that individuals consider a different sort of leader, somebody who's gone through something that is more like an average Rhode Islander's life. I also believe that if we do not change who we have as leaders, we will not be able to protect the future for our children. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to stand up because, things haven't changed. 1909, NAACP is founded. Mostly, it was multiracial, but leadership was white. Ida B. Wells, W.E.B. Du Bois, they did research. So when I hear coded language in this race about us taking subservient roles or commission roles, I'm reminded of the founding of the NAACP. When the NAACP had its first black president in 1920, the ACLU was founded white people. The more they started to collaborate, the less the NAACP pushed, the more tempered it became. And then we had other organizations come up in the 60s. 1966, Black Panthers. 1968, Puerto Rican Young Lords. These organizations realized that if you did not push harder, things would not change. And they also realized that the food lines were the voting lines. 1969, Tax Reform Act creates 501c3. Now you cannot combine the food lines and the voting lines. You separate them so you can starve and not have representation. That is what we are facing in Rhode Island. We are starving from resources and we do not have representation. We have gatekeepers in our community having us run. Stokely Carmichael, run towards that next degree. Run towards that subservient position. Run towards the early grave. We're out of breath. We're not going to run anymore. This is a stand that we're taking. A system will not accept our shared vision of change when it deems us illegitimate. And right now, Channel 12, this racist, left-leaning media organization, is not only excluding me from the next debate, and no one that cares about equity here saying anything, it's also excluding the only black candidate in CD2's race, congressional race, Dr. Bob. Dr. Bob. Racism is consistently accepted in this state. No one's doing anything. No one. We have organizations possibly that can't do it. But the people need to rise up. The people need to rise up and vote for Munoz September 13th.
All right, so these are your candidates for governor. Now we're going to proceed to question number 2. If you were elected governor, what would you do to make this state more supportive of small business? And as a reference, the latest CNBC ranking listed Rhode Island as number 45 in the best states for business. I'm going to start with Ashley.
Yeah, so we need to build a better business environment. And what that means is that we need to reduce regulation, we need to lower our taxes so that we can be regionally competitive. If we do that, then we'll encourage businesses to come here rather than having to bribe businesses to be here. What we have done is we have undertaken an agenda where we use economic development really as corporate welfare. And we need to stop doing that. We need to have economic development tools used in order to supercharge small businesses because we are a small business state and we need to be able to support them. The other thing that we need to do is we need to leverage our assets. I believe that the economy of the future in Rhode Island is the blue economy, and the blue economy is the sustainable use of the ocean for economic growth. And we can build that economy in a way that is inclusive and also in a way that includes all communities rather than picking winners and losers. The other thing that we need to do is focus on education. Education reform is critical to the economic future of our state. If we have the brain power, companies will want to be here. So as governor, I would pursue education reform, and fixing the education system would be my top priority, because it all starts with education. It is our silver bullet, it is where we need to start.
So one of us in this table has actually tackled making it a better business climate for small businesses. And not just some small businesses, but all small businesses. By training the staff at the Secretary of State into how to make things easier for regular folks, making government forms friendly to the people that they're supposed to be serving, and making those information resources multilingual so that a variety of people can do it. You bring a diverse staff into your agencies so that from the get-go you have a very different look and feel to the government that's supposed to be supporting small businesses. Small businesses are 90% of our state's economy. We absolutely have to make sure that we support small businesses. And in my time as Secretary of State, we've done exactly just that. In fact, in 2020, all of the steps that we did to make sure that small businesses had a better business climate led to a record-setting incorporation in establishment of small businesses during the pandemic, because it was so much easier to do business. In 2021, we broke that record again. So it's about making sure that government is there to work for people. And in this case, it's the people that run small businesses. Our communities of color have not been seen as the assets that they are. We should be doing export-import programs with countries like Liberia, Colombia, other places that our communities of color know how to get around it. That's just one example of how we can actually do this. So I look forward as your governor to be bringing people into the administration that know all of the different communities, that will help me completely transform government to make it friendlier and easier for people to do business in this state. And I'm looking forward to doing that with all of you.
So I talk to small businesses every day around this state. Today I spent a couple of hours meeting small businesses in Providence with Mayor Lorza. And I can tell you, this state is not easy for small businesses. It is disgraceful. We rank 45th out of 50th in this country because we have far too much red tape and bureaucracy. So there's nothing about it that's easy. And I'll give you an example. I met a guy who owns 3 restaurants, 2 in Pawtucket and 1 in Worcester, Mass. He said to me, Helena, when I opened my second restaurant in Pawtucket, I had to go to 13 different websites and locations for all the paperwork and permits. That is disgraceful. That is nothing to be proud of. We have a lot more work to be done. Do you know what the difference is for him when he opened his restaurant in Worcester, Massachusetts? Concierge service, one-stop shop. We can do that. That's what we need to be working on, something breakthrough for small businesses. Number 2, we should absolutely not be proposing we raise taxes on small businesses as we head into a recession. This would be a big mistake, and I am completely opposed to that. We have to make sure the burden on small businesses does not grow. Third, education. Education. We are not graduating students who can work in this world, who have the skills they need to compete. And it's a moral duty, but it is a huge economic duty. And when we fix our schools, we're going to lift up our businesses, and our business economy will grow, and it will make this a much more effective state for everyone who lives here.
Can we have a show of hands? How many people here work in a small business? Does anybody own a small business? Okay, so you know that it is really, really hard to run a small business in this state. And why is that? Again, it's a policy decision by the people in power, because you know what? When Amazon wanted to come to Rhode Island, Governor McKee had millions of dollars to throw at them, and that's what happened. Anybody here working in a small business, running a small business, seeing that kind of support from this government? No. Why? Because the big corporations have all the power in the system, and the politicians work for them. And the small businesses, and the people who own them, and the people who work in them get left behind over and over. So when I'm governor, we're going to change that. We're going to have what many states do, which is called a graduated business tax. Bigger corporations pay a higher rate, smaller businesses pay a lower rate to take the burden off of small businesses and make it fair. Secondly, what's one of the biggest burdens on small businesses? Healthcare costs for their employees. Why are they paying healthcare costs? Because we, unlike so many other countries, don't have a Medicare for all style healthcare system. The businesses and the individuals get stuck with the bill. So when I'm governor, we will pass a Medicare for all system so the burden is not on our smaller businesses. Third, if we're going to have successful and growing small businesses, we need people who have some money in their pockets to come down to the store and buy something. People in our state don't have money in their pockets because they don't have the wages to cover their housing, their health care, their utility bill. They got nothing left to go down to the small business and buy something. So when I'm governor, we will enact a $19 an hour minimum wage, which is just about $40,000 a year, so people have a little bit of money in their pockets and can shop at their local business. Thank you.
I think I broke it the last time. All right. You know, I'm standing. Sitting down for me is a little comfortable. Why are we seeing so much money pour into corporations? Just look at the donor list for everybody running for office. Just look at the donor list. Track the donor list to every deal that's made after the fact, every deal that's made before, right? And so, you know, in Malcolm X's words, they have you running away from the wolf into the mouth of a fox. This is the game in Rhode Island. It's always about the lesser evil. Who's going to do a little less of the cronyism? You know, the way that we need to fix our economy is by focusing on micro businesses. If we're going to raise corporate taxes for big businesses and qualify what big is, we need to remove the regressive tangible property tax. It's that tax that small businesses have to pay on things that are like 10, 20 years old. That's regressive. Democrats aren't talking about that because it takes a robust investment by the state to support cities and towns to create exemptions for tangible property tax. We need to talk about a supplemental wage program to support those micro businesses so that they can increase the amount that they're paying their employees. And we need to open up Rhode Island Promise to non-traditional students that can normally only attend part-time but aren't admitted now, right? Everybody talks about equity, but no one talks about connecting the dots, which have been staring us in the face for the past 4-8 years. You know, yes, we need a single payer system here in Rhode Island, but it doesn't happen with just money. We need free community health clinics that people can walk to. Yes, we need more skills, but we need to invite people into these programs and give them the skill sets. So pull all the training programs into Rhode Island Promise so that the state's accountable. Because if we keep relying on these private companies in Quonset to create training programs, how many people in South Providence are going to get to Quonset? Right? This is all a facade, smoke and mirrors. People that have sat in office here did not stand up when Gina Raimundo waived the minority and woman-owned contract requirements during 2020. That's a fact. If you do not have the courage to stand up when you're in office, you will not have the courage to sit in the office of governor. Vote Munoz.
I'd ask you if you could just pass that mic back. We'll reconnect in a second. So question number 3 has a bit of a preamble to it. Rhode Island Kids Count reported the following in its 2022 fact book. In Rhode Island, in 2021, 40% of third graders met expectations on the comprehensive assessment, the RICAS test, in English language arts. For Black students in Rhode Island, the percentage of youth meeting expectations is a mere 24%. The question, how do you propose increasing literacy rates among Black children in Rhode Island, and what organizations would you partner with to do that work? And we'll begin with you, Nellie.
So education is key. It's one of the 3 things that I'm going to tackle as governor. And it's key for our kids, and we all know it. Rhode Island is amazing in that it has all of these kids from a variety of language backgrounds. And under my governorship, we are going to value multilingual literacy. And multilingual literacy and English language literacy are not mutually exclusive. They are complementary. And so we are going to do that. We are going to continue to grow the capacity of our kids to get that work done. Now, what organization? I would actually start by going to United Way. You all combine a lot of these groups that are already doing the work. There's no reason to reinvent the wheel or to create a commission. We have the existing nonprofit sector that can help us. I would work with not just education groups, education advocacy groups, I would also work with the parent groups, because parents are definitely engaged and involved in these issues. I would actually include labor unions. The teachers' unions are not our enemy. They need to be at the table and included, and so do the administrators, the support staff, the behavioral health staff. All of those people have pieces of this solution that need to be put together. I know how to do that work because you've seen me do it before. When we had to modernize our election system, I did that kind of work. When we had to build affordable housing and build a coalition to solve the housing crisis, I got that work done. I know how to bring people together to solve issues like the literacy levels in our cities, and I will be absolutely on this as governor.
I have the most comprehensive education plan of anyone running, and I ask you to go to my website and compare my plan to anyone else running. $1 billion investment in public schools. And there are so many things we need to do. By the way, I mentioned earlier the $400 million that came from the federal government, which has not been spent. All of this money could be working today for our kids. So what are some of the ideas? Before and after school care, summer programs, mental health counselors. We have a massive shortage in our schools. We need to increase the number of mental health counselors. Every K through 3 classroom should have a teaching assistant. ESL certification. In our state, teachers need to pay for their own certifications. In Massachusetts, the state covers it. That's pretty simple. We've got to look at all these components. I've got everything on my website. A big part of this, though, and this is particularly true for students of color, is they do not have teachers to look up to, who look like them and share their lived experiences. I propose we expand the Rhode Island Promise program, so if you go to 4 years of school in-state to become a teacher, and you serve for 4 years, we will pay your tuition. This will solve for one of the big discrepancies. In Providence, as an example, 88% of our children are people of color, and just north of 10% of our teachers are. It's a big gap. We've got to solve it. And finally, I will hold myself accountable. If I don't improve our kids' scores, I won't run again. And everyone in this state deserves a governor who's going to hold herself accountable for results and not just talk like politicians have done for years, but actually make something happen.
We've got to get to the root of the problem, which is that the people who've been running things chose to give a massive tax cut to the richest 1%. That's people just making over $450,000 a year. That tax cut, just to that richest group of people at the top, has cost the state $1 billion over the last 15 years. While we've left thousands of kids without the education they deserve, school buildings literally crumbling. So, and that's left us in a situation where the richest people in this state pay a lower share of their income in state and local taxes than everybody else. The rich pay a lower tax rate here than working people and middle-class communities. So when I'm governor, we'll raise taxes on the richest 1%. We'll use those funds to create smaller class sizes, to raise the starting pay of our teachers. Average pay for starting teachers in the state is $43,000 a year. We have starting teachers who, after a day of teaching, instead of planning for the next day, are driving an Uber because they can't make ends meet on a teacher's salary. So we'll raise the starting pay of teachers to $60,000 a year at a minimum. We'll also fight for a constitutional amendment that will give parents the right to sue the state if their kids are not getting an equal quality education. In terms of organizations to partner with, one I would partner with is City Year, that I helped to start and that I ran here as executive director, that provides tutors and mentors working on literacy issues in the schools. And I would partner with the Providence Student Union, that's working to bring school reform to our schools, including getting the police out of the school building and instead having social workers and mental health care professionals and others that we need in our schools. Thank you.
Joe Buchanan, I see you. Providence Student Union, Arise, Progreso Latino, right? They're organizations, youth-led organizations that are focused on education advocacy. Youth knows what they need. We can't wait 8 years. A lot of these pipeline program plans, like, we need to do them, but we can't wait 8 years to help our kids. We have an education funding formula that is inequitable. The notion that a constitutional amendment should be needed, that we should have to sue the state for them to do what's right, is crazy. It's crazy. Our education funding formula concentrates poverty. It qualifies it simply as if you have free or discounted lunch. The state barely puts anything in the pot, and cities and towns can withhold money when they want to. That's the difference between the east side of Cranston and the west side. We need to change the education funding formula. We need to remove the barriers to teachers of color coming from other states. We got teachers that are starting at a higher step level when they're coming here and they have to drop down. You think they're going to come here? It isn't just a matter of pay. We as Democrats need to acknowledge that we can be pro-labor movement and still get teachers out of our school systems that have used racial slurs against our students. If we do not make these changes and push for them, you can have all the endorsements you want, but nothing is going to change for our communities. That's how we change education. That's how we improve literacy rates. And we do so also through a comprehensive after-school program that gives more money to the organizations doing the work. We need to connect the dots. Not a new after-school program, but an after-school program that gives money to Arise, gives it to Providence Student Union, to Progreso Latino. Not the big ones that have millions, the small ones. Connect them and make Brown house these programs. Make Brown, that doesn't pay taxes, do more. I'm sick of continuing to look away from a colonizing institution that has hurt our communities more than it's helped it. I'm running for governor for a lot of reasons. We need the courage to do these things. It's not just talk. Thank you.
The first thing that we need to do is ensure that education is a constitutional right. Every child, no matter their zip code, should have access to quality education. And when I'm governor, if your child is trapped in a failing school, you will have a school of your choice. Let's also talk about long-term education reform and what will be needed to get it done. The first thing is that we need to have high standards, which means ending high-stakes end-of-the-year testing and moving towards progress-based testing. It also means supporting our teachers by providing high-quality professional development. We also need to pay teachers more. Teachers are not paid in a regionally competitive way, and if teachers help turn around a failing school, teachers should be bonused. They should be compensated for that. We also need to level the playing field, and what that means is that we must reform the school funding formula. We must account for English as second language student learners and also special education. Level funding is not equitable funding. The other thing we must do is we must close gaps. And that means that COVID learning loss is real, and that we should take the money that was directed to help children and move it to individualized tutoring to help close gaps. We also must acknowledge that we must be flexible because one size does not fit all. We must invest in models like Davies, which is a technical training program that also is about academic excellence. Those schools provide a pathway to high-paying jobs. Education reform is going to take a lot of work. We need the long-term solution of doing the hard work that Massachusetts did when I was growing up, and allowed me to have a mechanism, and also the short-term thing, which is school choice, which is what I exercise and which saved my future.
All right. The next question is regarding law enforcement. Law enforcement officers in 16 states are shielded by statuses called the Law Enforcement Officers' Bill of Rights, or LEOBOR, as you may know it, which provides law enforcement officers facing investigations and disciplinary actions for alleged instances of misconduct with procedural privileges and protections that are not afforded to civilians accused of crimes. Rhode Island is the only New England state to have LEOBOR. As governor, are you willing to sign into law a bill on reform or repeal of LEOBOR? And if so or not, please describe your position. We'd love to start with you.
Yes, absolutely. We need to reform LEOBOR. It is not okay that our police chiefs cannot suspend the police officers who aren't doing their jobs and are doing a real disservice and harm to the communities. It's reprehensible. We have it right now in Providence, situation where we've seen it, and we have the chief of police who cannot hold this police officer accountable. So there's a lot of work to be done. I'm 100% committed to that. I also want to say that we have a huge opportunity to make sure that we have more support in the communities, in our schools. Thank you for being here, making sure we do have more counselors in our schools, not cops, because when we have SROs in our schools, it's like having a hammer looking for a nail. It's a problem, and it is not solving anything. We've got to make sure we've got mental health counselors supporting our children. So thank you very much for being here tonight.
I'm sorry, I really don't understand why we would try to reform a law that is so fundamentally unjust. It needs to be repealed. It needs to be repealed. Let's just be clear about what the law is. What the law says is that a different set of rules apply to the police than apply to everybody else. We need to repeal LEOBOR so that police officers are held accountable like everybody else under our laws and Constitution. Not with a separate set of rules. So it needs to be repealed, and I'll fight for it as governor. And we need to make other changes to our criminal justice system that are absolutely fundamental. We need to ban cash bail. We need to ban for-profit prisons. We need to ban solitary confinement. We need to free all nonviolent drug offenders. We need to make real changes to our criminal justice system, including repealing LEOBOR. Thank you.
If a doctor operates on the wrong side of your head, do you want him to have other rights? Do you want him to have some other standard that he can operate under? No. So why with cops? Counselors, not cops. You know, we have police officers in the state of Rhode Island that we're lucky have not killed someone and then continue to collect their pension, but that's what can happen with LEOBOR. That's what can happen. It will delay justice, will delay accountability in every situation, harm or death. We need to repeal LEOBOR. We need to add counselors and take all the cops out of the schools. There have been over 230 violent arrests in our Providence schools since 2016. What do you think, that doesn't create trauma for the kids that aren't slammed on the ground? We have a criminal justice system that's completely flawed. We have 8 judges of color out of 63. 8. And yet over 50% of our prison population is Hispanic and black, and that doesn't even account for the fact that some Hispanics continue to put white when they fill in the census data. We need representation across every level, every level. We talk about the accreditation process. Providence, Central Falls EP will say, Chief Roberson, who I respect, will say, we meet the national accreditation standard. Well, that standard doesn't include racial justice. It doesn't include hiring practices. It doesn't include burnout. The structure of the national accreditation process for police departments is still designed to persecute people of color, to learn on the field on the heads of our youth. In Rhode Island, it is repealingly a board. It is enhancing our accreditation process to exceed the national standard, which requires an investment so that we hold our officers accountable, so that we increase diversity, and so that we can talk about diversion programs that are community-driven with participatory budgeting at every city and town level, so that the people are deciding the form factor of their public safety system.
I believe in reform. I believe in due process as well, which is what that currently provides, and it's not perfect. So I believe that reform is the answer. Making sure that we move suspensions to 15 days is a possibility, and also ensuring that the individuals that are part of the committee are representative of both the community, government officials, and police officers. The other thing that I would want is to make it so the police chiefs can be more transparent with the community and communicate when things are happening. Because sometimes silence feels like being complicit. And I think being open and transparent with the community, that is part of the reform, would help with community relations. I think that we need to do work to improve the relationship between the community and police officers. I think it's necessary work, and I think that what would be important is to ensure that the police force is representative of the communities that are served. The police officers are part of the communities, so that the only interaction with the police officer isn't an interaction that's one that's stressful. And getting to know the police officer in your community is so important. Seeing them shopping in the store rather than just coming to your house in a stressful moment. So I do believe that reform is necessary. I think that the way that the difficult conversations that we need to have to improve the relationships do need to happen in an open, transparent way.
Public safety issues of crime, issues of arrests and everything have changed dramatically as we have learned more about what's happening on the ground, right? Cameras have helped us see things that people in communities of color have seen every single day of their lives now. We have greater understanding about mental health issues and how those affect people in terms of how they behave and what choices they have in front of them. And so, well, I support reforming Leobor. I supported Representative Williams' bill. We have to change the way public safety operates, particularly in regards to communities of color. But what's happening here is not just about the police and the community. It's also about issues of poverty, issues of race, and we need to invest in community organizations and in communities that are facing these problems. And so as governor, part of my commitment is to support that sector, the caregiving sector within communities of color that actually can help provide solutions in different spaces and to provide greater economic opportunities that haven't been provided to this day because people of color are not seen as the assets that they are. They're not given the same opportunities. And I know that because I have worked on these issues, again, throughout time. I am committed to making sure that our economy is more equitable and just. That when we develop programs for new businesses, for renewable energy, that those are all open and participatory to the greater diversity that is the state of Rhode Island. It cannot be just one community getting all the benefits from all of these resources that are now developing. And that is going to help us change how our communities work.
Thank you. This is question number 5, and after this question, each of our candidates will have had a chance to go first, and then we'll begin a second round of questions, which will be slightly shorter. It is important for Rhode Island to have a fair and balanced judiciary that reflects the diversity of our state. I'm not sure if Luis had a preview to our question. There are only 8 judges of color out of 63 judges on the Rhode Island State Supreme Superior Family District court and workers' compensation courts. As governor, what would be your vision and strategy for securing strong, diverse representation on the courts and ensuring that everyone gets a fair shot at justice, no matter the color of their skin, their background, or their bank account? And we'll start with you, Louis. Oh, sorry, we'll start with you, Ashley.
So having a diverse judiciary is really important. I've heard this question before, and quite frankly, I'm puzzled because I've built diverse organizations, and it is it's part of my values. But I'm shocked at where Rhode Island is. For me, it would be a priority. The way that we got here was through Democrats that talk a lot about diversity, but then when they go to appoint judges, they appoint people that they know, and they use the know-a-guy system to hand out judgeships to their friends and to people who've done them favors. So what you will see in a Kalis administration is somebody who isn't beholden to anyone, and somebody who will appoint judges that represent the communities that they serve, because that is so critically important for the credibility of a judicial system. And the reason that we are where we are now is because there is a power structure in this state, a democratic power structure that has had power for 80 years, that promises during election years and then doesn't deliver results. It's all about lip service rather than about results. What happens in back rooms is the result is your courtrooms. And that system must stop. We cannot have insiders or career politicians or people who are beholden to other people make these deals and not hold them accountable. Yes, I will change the future, but I ask in the election that you hold the party that professes to care about these issues but doesn't deliver results accountable for the first time.
So, Representative Judiciary, I am extremely proud that one of our Supreme Court justices is Melissa Long, who for many years was my Deputy Secretary of State, Director of Administration. That is how change happens. You surround yourself with people that can then go into those positions. You change structures. I have worked long and hard with the NAACP and other minority organizations in making sure that we have a representative democracy. We open up elections so that our Senate and our House of Representatives at the state level are more representative of the communities that are in our state. So that when judicial confirmation hearings happen, you've got people on the inside advocating for change, for candidates that truly represent the diversity of our state. I know how to do that work. I know how to do that. Now, you have a judicial nominating commission that needs to be representative of the community. So every step of the way, you include people into those decision-making rooms. That's how you get a diverse judiciary. And we have to start by making sure that our Black and brown and immigrant legal students know that there are opportunities in this state to be able to work. I have had numerous conversations with law firms in this state about diversity issues and challenged them repeatedly to hire lawyers of color. Those are the kinds of conversations that I will continue to have. It's not because I'm Secretary of State. I have always been having these conversations and excited about the possibility of making even more change happen and bringing more people into the judiciary. It is absolutely essential to create a more equitable and just society.
We absolutely need to make sure that our judges reflect the diversity of this incredible state, and they do not today. And I agree with Ashley here. I think it reflects a state where you got to know a guy, and that's a very sad state of affairs. It's one of the big reasons I'm running, because it's not okay to prop up your friends and not think about who's really reflected in these incredibly important positions. You know, I talk to so many, and throughout my career, I have a 30-year career in business, and I always knew the importance of lifting people up, whether it was women or people of color, to make sure they had a seat at the table, make sure we had a pipeline of candidates. I worked with so many men who made assumptions about whether women really wanted to step up and take more responsibility. And I said to them, why don't we let the women decide, not let you make assumptions for them? And I think that kind of experience will serve me very well as governor, because you've got to fight a system here that has the back of the old system, the old guard. And so when I'm governor, I promise you, I will have the most diverse selection of judges this state has ever seen, because it will make us better. All of us will be better when our judges reflect the people of this great state.
If we had any doubts about the power of the judiciary to shape our society, shape our lives, define our rights, define and decide who has power in society, just look at what the Supreme Court has done over the last 6 months. We have to, if we're going to build the kind of society we want, we have to have a judiciary made up of people who represent, reflect, and understand our communities. I've been involved in a project for the last 3 or 4 years to make our state legislature, the legislative branch, a place that reflects our communities, that is made up of people who represent our communities. That's through my work with the Rhode Island Political Cooperative, which through the elections that we ran, the races that we ran for the legislature in 2020, made the Rhode Island legislature take a huge leap forward in terms of the diversity, racial diversity and balance of the legislature. We need to do the same thing with the judiciary branch, and we need to do it the same way, which is to make a commitment to it, to get out there into the communities and talk to people, ask people to serve. And so my criteria for appointing judges will not be what it's been, what I've seen my whole life, which is that the people in power appoint former politicians, their friends, their relatives to the bench. That won't be the way. The way will be to look for people who have worked in the community, who represent our community, more people of color, and people with a track record of fighting for racial justice. Those will be the criteria for people we appoint to the bench. Thank you.
I agree. Activism should be a part of the criteria. A lot of this is coded, though. When you hear representation, the numbers actually add up. 13%, a judge, 63. Oh yeah, the population of Hispanics, blacks, and other races kind of falls into that. It's a trap. When we talk about representation, we need to have the number of judges of color that match the people in prison, the people that are going to be asking for parole, the people that are going to be criminalized by a cannabis legalization system that won't put them in prison for selling on the block, but for bootlegging. You know, there's a lot of traps in the criminal justice system, and unless we start to exponentially increase the number of judges of color, our people will continue to get imprisoned for different reasons. There are traps all around us. What you heard here about representation is one of them. The language we use, we need to define and qualify. You know, none of this is going to change unless we acknowledge that our people that are in prison are being tortured right now. They're being tortured. Solitary confinement. Makia's had an opportunity to change it. People here have had an opportunity to take a position. Some have, some haven't. People are being tortured, our people. People are being used as slave labor in the private prison. Why? ICE contracts are taking family members out of Central Falls, and then Central Falls, beautiful park across where those kids play, they're having to look across the street, at times knowing that their loved ones are there. Central Falls, where I grew up. This system will not change unless we have a governor in office that acknowledges these traps of language and of process and of procedure and aims to increase the number of judges to match the number of people of color that are already stuck in a failed system.
So as you can tell, we have a little bit of a problem with one of the chords, so that's why I've been switching them back and forth. But in typical fashion, we overcome, right? We overcome any adversity. I'm going to call an audible, considering the time and the temperature. We're going to take a 4-minute restroom break. I want to make sure that everyone has that the candidates have a chance to use the restrooms located to my right. And we'll begin back again at 8:24. And I want to let you know before we go, we are going to reserve time at the end for audience participation. So if you have questions that are burning of individual candidates, we want you to be here to be able to ask your questions directly. So 4 minutes and we'll be back again.
And we'll be back in just a few minutes.